why didn't she turn her therapy records to the committee for review? That's an interesting question. Well, the Democrats don't want you to ponder on this question because they want you to just believe what they say about what they want you to believe. Dr. Ford has struggled to identify Judge Kavanaugh as the assailant by name several occasions. No name was given in her 2012 marriage therapy notes. No name was given in her 2013 individual therapy notes. So what is she hiding?
Would it be fair to say that somebody drove you somewhere, either to the party or home from the party?
Correct.
Okay. Has anyone come forward to say to you, hey, remember, I was the one that drove you home?
No.
Okay.
While she actually remembers how many drinks she had and that she was not on medication at that time. If she could remember specific details like that, but if I forget other kind of details. But again, she remembers the exact name of the person whom she never mentioned in her therapy reports.
Were you not able to hear the conversation or not able to understand the conversation?
I couldn't hear the conversation. I was upstairs.
Okay. How do you know there was a conversation?
I'm just assuming since it was a social gathering, people were talking.
Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's account of who was at the party has been inconsistent. According to the Washington Post's account of her therapy notes, there were 4 boys in the bedroom in which she was assaulted. She told the Washington Post, however, that the notes were erroneous because there were 4 boys at the party, but only 2 in the bedroom. In her letter to Senator Feinstein, she said me and 4 others were present at the party. In her testimony, she said there were 4 boys in addition to Lillian Kaiser and herself. She could not remember the name of the 4th boy and no one has come forward. Dr. Ford listed Patrick P.J. Smith as a bystander in her statement to the polygrapher and in her July 6 text to the Washington Post, although she testified that it was inaccurate to call him a bystander. She did not list Lillian Kaiser, even though they are good friends. Lillian Kaiser's presence should have been more memorable than P.J. Smith's, whom she first stated as a bystander but then clarified that he was not actually in the room where the incident took place. You're probably wondering how she managed to put this lie in the polygraphy test and pass, right? Well, there is an interesting thing about the polygraphy test that she took, which I would like to mention here, even though there is an entire video dedicated for just the polygraphy test. The words Brett Kavanaugh, rape, sexual assault, physical abuse, none of these words were used in the questions that were asked to Christine Blasey, who was a psychology professor and also helped at least one person in how to take a polygraphy test. All this will be explained in the later video. Also, there were only 2 words that she actually spoke which were measured on the polygraphy tests. No and another no. The statements were constructed such a way that she just needs to answer either no or yes, and she just answered 2 words no to the statements and questions that did not include any of the important words that are required to corroborate her claims.
You've talked about attending therapy. In your text to the Washington Post dated 7/6, so that's the very first statement we have from you, you put in there, quote, have therapy records talking about it. I want to make sure I understand that. Did you already have your therapy records at that time?
I had looked at them online to see if they exist.
Did you show a full or partial set of those marriage therapy records to the Washington Post?
I don't remember. I remember summarizing for her what they said. So I'm not quite sure if I actually gave her the record.
Okay. So it's possible that the reporter did not see these notes.
I don't know if I can't recall whether she saw them directly or if I just told her what they said.
Would it also be fair to say that the therapist notes that we've been talking about say that there were 4 boys in the room?
It describes the sexual assault, and it says erroneously by 4 boys. So the therapist got the content of it wrong.
And you corrected that to the Washington Post reporter, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Ford, the Washington Post reported in their September 16th article that you did show them therapist notes. Is that incorrect?
I don't remember physically showing her a note. Perhaps my counsel did. I don't remember physically showing her my copy of the note.
Okay.
But I just don't remember.
Dr. Ford has struggled to recall important recent events relating to her allegations. These are not events that happened 35 years ago or when she was in distress. These are events after she initiated the first contact with Washington Post. And her testimony regarding recent events raises further questions about her memory. Dr. Ford struggled to remember her interactions with the Washington Post, which happened as recently as July 6th. Dr. Ford could not remember if she showed a full or partial set of therapy notes to the Washington Post reporter. She does not remember whether she showed the Post reporter the therapist's notes or her own summary of those notes. The Washington Post article said that portions of her therapist's notes were provided by Ford and reviewed by the Post. But in her testimony, Dr. Ford could not recall whether she summarized the notes for the reporter or showed her the actual therapy records.
And Brett Kavanaugh's name is not in those notes, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. In reading the Washington Post article, it mentions that this incident that we're here about contributed to anxiety and PTSD problems with which you have struggled. The word contributed, does that mean that there are other things that have happened that have also contributed to anxiety and PTSD?
I think that's a great question. I think the etiology of anxiety and PTSD is multifactorial. So that was certainly a critical risk that we would call it a risk factor in science. So that would be a predictor of the symptoms that I now have. It doesn't mean that other things that have happened in my life would make it worse or better. There are other risk factors as well.
So have there been other things then that have contributed to the anxiety and PTSD that you suffered?
Well, I think there's sort of biological predispositions that everyone in here has for particular disorders, so I can't rule out that I would have.
Dr. Ford refused to provide any of her therapy notes to the committee. Dr. Ford's explanation of why she disclosed her allegations the way she did raises questions. She claimed originally that she wished for her story to remain confidential, but the person operating the tip line at the Washington Post was the first person other than her therapist or husband to whom she disclosed the identity of her alleged attacker, whose name was never mentioned in any of her therapy reports or therapy notes that she made. She testified that she had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President. She did not contact the Senate because she claims she did not know how to do that. She does not explain why she knew how to contact her congresswoman but not her senator. Dr. Ford could not remember if she was being audio or video recorded when she took the polygraph, and she could not remember whether the polygraph occurred the same day as her grandmother's funeral or the day after her grandmother's funeral. It would also have been inappropriate to administer a polygraph to someone who was grieving, because the emotional state would not clearly identify the variations in the emotional state if the person was lying.
It's been reported by the press that you would not submit to an interview with the committee because of your fear of flying. Is that true?
Well, I was hoping that they would come to me, but then realized that was an unrealistic request.
It would have been a quicker trip for me.
Yes. So that was certainly what I was hoping, was to avoid having to get on an airplane, but I eventually was able to get up the gumption with the help of some friends and get on the plane.
When you were here in the mid-Atlantic area back in August, end of July, August, how did you get here?
Also by airplane. I come here once a year during the summer to visit my family.
Okay,
I'm sorry, not here. I go to Delaware.
okay. In fact, you fly fairly frequently for your hobbies, and you've had to fly for your work. Is that true?
Correct, unfortunately.
You were a consulting biostatistician in Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
I've never been to Australia, but the company that I worked for is based in Australia, and they have an office in San Francisco, California.
Okay.
I don't think I'll make it to Australia.
It is long. I also saw on your CV that you list the following interests of surf travel, and you, in parentheses, put Hawaii, Costa Rica, South Pacific Islands, and French Polynesia. Have you been all to those places
Correct.
by airplane?
Yes.
And your interests also include oceanography, Hawaiian and Tahitian culture. Did you travel by air as a part of those interests?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Easier for me to travel going that direction when it's a vacation.
Dr. Ford's description of the psychological impact of the event raises questions. She maintains that she suffers from anxiety, claustrophobia, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The date of the hearing was delayed because the committee was informed that her symptoms prevent her from flying, but she agreed during her testimony that she flies fairly frequently for her hobbies and work. She flies to the mid-Atlantic at least once a year to visit her family. She has flown to Hawaii, French Polynesia, and Costa Rica. She also flew to Washington, D.C. for the hearing. Note that her attorneys refused a private hearing or interview. Dr. Ford testified that she was not clear on whether investigators were willing to travel to California to interview her. It therefore is not clear that her attorneys ever communicated Chairman Grassley's offer to send investigators to meet her in California, or whether she wanted to meet to conduct the interview. Did the Democratic-leaning lawyers who worked free have a bigger political agenda by making sure her case is held in the best media-covered event possible? She alleges that she struggled academically in college, but she has never made any similar claim about her last 2 years of high school. It is significant that she used the word contributed when she described the psychological impact of the incident to the Washington Post. Use of the word contributed rather than caused suggests that other life events may have contributed to her symptoms as well. And when questioned on that point, she said she could think of nothing as striking as the alleged assault.